My grandfather was an inventor. All his life he's been tinkering with something, either taking something that existed and changing it, making it into something brand new, or at the very least different, or inventing something entirely from spare parts. And while nothing he invented was ever earth-shaking, it was always one of my greatest delights, ever since I was a little girl, to see what he'd made. Childhood visits to his home would always begin or end with me sitting on the couch, a look of absolute fascination on my tiny face as he showed off whatever gadget he'd put together in his workshop this time around. It was like having my own personal Santa who worked all year round to fill my 8-year-old mind with wonder and glee. My older sister was likewise excited. No matter how much she tried to hide the excitement it filled her with, probably in an effort to appear cooler or more mature than myself. And while, because of real life getting in the way, the visits became fewer and fewer the older we got, we would always make time to see him at least a few times a year. And every time he would have something new to show us. He really was a genius. I should add that isn't meant to imply something horrible happened to him. I'm sure some days he wishes it had, that it had been him who had wound up in that hospital instead of my sister, but no, he went in his sleep, and I hope that his passing was a peaceful one. Even all these years later, I can't bring myself to be angry about what happened, can't bring myself to hate him. He had no idea what would happen, no clue how things would pan out. He knew something was wrong, oh yes. He wasn't some doddering old fool. He knew the first time he looked through them that something was wrong, but he thought it was something only a little odd, something unsettling and curious perhaps, but not anything dangerous. Not anything that would harm anyone. I think deep down he just wanted to know that he wasn't crazy. He wanted to be sure that he wasn't seeing things. And who can blame him? There were 3 of us that year. Myself and my girlfriend Justine and my sister Joan. We were both used to our grandfather being bursting with energy to show us whatever he'd put together, so his oddly subdued mood when he came to the door to greet us came as a bit of a surprise. I was a little disappointed, in fact, as I'd been hoping Justine would get to share in the experience of having a new invention demonstrated before our awestruck eyes. We'd only started dating that year, so it would be the first chance she got to see the kind of things I'd been telling her about. The day passed pleasantly enough as we chatted, enjoyed lunch and watched the television together. I think it was Joan who asked him, finally, if he had anything special to show us today. We knew that he'd been working on something, as while this was the first time we'd seen him in person in a while, we'd both spoke to him on the phone in the preceding months, and he'd eagerly explained to us that he was working on something he thought would be quite extraordinary. I still couldn't tell you how he made them, nor would I if I could. Nor could I tell you what his original idea for those oddly colored circles of glass had been, before that fateful day he'd looked through them and seen what he'd seen. He never shared details of his work with us beforehand, as he wanted it to be a surprise, and afterwards I think he was terrified of the thought of anyone replicating what he'd made. All I know is that when Joan pressed him to reveal his latest invention, he looked nervous in a way I'd never seen him before, looked as if he was deeply troubled by something. He hesitated before speaking, as if not sure he should say anything at all, before explaining to us that the nature of what he was working on had changed after an unusual event, and that he wasn't sure if it would be a good idea to show us the end result. Now we may have grown since the days when we could perch on his knee, but whether someone is 2 years old or in their 20s, the surest way to make them want something all the more is to tell them they can't have it. So his reluctance, which at the time I'm sure we both thought was feigned, to heighten the suspense before the unveiling, just made us both want to see his invention more than ever. With a little persuading, he agreed and left to fetch it. He came back a few moments later with what appeared to be a pair of glasses. With one big difference. The lenses were like no glass we'd ever seen before. I can't even describe the color of it without resorting to words like reddish or green-white, as they didn't seem to be exactly any color that we have a name for. In fact, they didn't seem to be exactly any one color at all, as if you tilted them one way they would look different to if you tilted them another. I know full well that probably sounds more like magic than something a well-meaning old man could put together in his humble little workshop, but there you have it. Joan asked what they did, and our grandfather paused for a few moments, as if not quite certain how to answer. In the end, he told us that we really had to put them on for ourselves, as he was certain neither of us would believe him if he told us. Joan wanted to put them on first, but as she lifted them off the table, he reached out and grabbed her hand. He cautioned her that it might be startling at first, but that she wasn't in any danger and that if she got frightened she could just take them off. He warned her that what she was about to see may not make any more sense to her than it did to him, but that we were all there and that she was safe. I could tell Joan was a little frightened. She always was lousy at hiding how she felt from people, and even I was feeling a bit unsettled by our grandfather being so uncharacteristically ominous about the whole thing. Joan slipped the glasses on and we waited. She gasped, and then for the next few moments she looked puzzled more than anything. Her lips moved wordlessly, and I thought I caught a "no, that's not right" under her breath as she seemed to look around at something none of us could see. And then she began screaming. I don't know if you've ever heard someone scream in horror in real life. I can promise you this, it is not like in the movies. The movies do not convey the awful sound of someone you love screaming their lungs out, making a noise more like an animal than a human being. They cannot make you feel the things I felt in that moment, watching Joan yank the glasses from her head and hurl them across the room. And nothing could have prepared us for the sight of Joan beginning to claw at her own eyes, screaming louder than anyone should be able to scream as she did it. It took all three of us to restrain her at first. When we had her pinned down so she couldn't hurt herself anymore, Justine and my grandfather held her that way while I called for an ambulance. I had to watch as she was strapped down and wheeled into the back of one, thrashing and hissing and shrieking like some mad animal, like something utterly consumed by fear. I explained what had happened, knowing full well how it made me sound. Justine and I both explained the series of events that lead to this to the skeptical, if not totally disbelieving hospital staff, and then to the specialists called in when nothing short of being tranquilized proved effective at stopping my sister from trying to hurt herself while screaming like that. The glasses had supposedly gone missing, which made proving what had happened difficult. And it wasn't until almost a year later, long after my sister had been committed, that my grandfather finally confessed to me that he destroyed them. I don't know if having them could have helped, could have given the doctors some way to make things right. I doubt it somehow, and I can't truly blame him for doing what he did, given that it was an act born out of guilt and an honest desire to make sure this didn't happen again. I asked him what my sister had seen that day, when he told me what he'd done. I asked what those glasses had done to her. He hadn't wanted to talk about it, and for the first time in my life I'd raised my voice to him, angrily demanding to know, after all this time, just what had driven my sister to this state. What had affected her so deeply, so profoundly, that she was now no longer even recognizable as the person I'd grown up with. He took me to his workshop and began digging around through the bits and pieces that littered the place, the half-finished and now long-discarded inventions still awaiting completion. He produced 2 pieces of glass rather like the ones that had been fitted into those glasses. He told me that there wasn't any way to describe it without sounding insane, that if I had to know then I had to see. But he begged me not to do this, that knowing wouldn't make things any better. He was right. I held the glass up to my eyes, and in an instant everything changed. Instead of just my grandfather stood before me, now there were dozens more in the room with us. But they weren't people. They were pale and emaciated, hunched over and dressed in dark clothing with black lips and wide lidless eyes that seemed to almost bulge from their skulls in a manner both comical and horrifying all at once. Their mouths were full of hundreds of thin teeth, like needles. Their fingers were grotesquely long and ended in dark and viciously pointed nails that scraped along the floor as they walked. And all of them were talking, or rather their lips were moving soundlessly. Each and every one of them was trying to say something that couldn't be heard, dozens upon dozens of voices trying to convey something. I dropped the glasses to the ground in shock. And my grandfather brought his foot down on them hard, grinding them to powder beneath his foot, muttering that he should have done this in the first place. He put an arm on my shoulder asking if I was all right. I was far from all right, and he had been correct. What I had seen had made things worse, not better. It took me a while to work it out, of course. Why this had such a horrifying effect on my sister, and yet I had survived the experience, frightened but not sporting the mental scars it had given her. The glasses only let me see the creatures. I couldn't hear what they were trying to say to me, couldn't understand the message they were trying to impart. But my sister was deaf. She could read their lips. I have this recurring nightmare. I attend this school where odd things happen. In this school, there are people I've never met before. Classes I've never taken. Every time I have this dream, I enter a classroom that is listed on my class schedule, and the teacher yells at me for not showing up for weeks or even months. The teacher embarrasses me in front of the class and makes me do work that I didn't even study for. I guess it's not the scariest thing someone can dream about, but being forced to do a mountain of missed classwork is horrible. It also feels embarrassing being humiliated in front of this made-up class. It always feels too real. I also get variations of this nightmare. Sometimes I dream that I'm running through the halls of the school trying to find where a class is. Then, by the time I find the classroom with the right room number, it's too late, class is over. Detention. I've had these types of dreams so many times that it feels like I'm enrolled in a completely different school in my mind when I'm asleep. I even have a mental image of what the school looks like from the outside after all those times I've been in recess or in the parking lot in other dreams. Sometimes it's a class with a teacher from an earlier dream, other times it's completely different. I figured these dreams were based on past experiences from elementary, middle, and high school that manifest themselves into vivid simulations from the back of my mind. But then 3 days ago I found out that it was a lot more than that. My friend Santiago and I ride motorcycles together when the weather is nice. For weeks we were planning on going to this huge motorcycle meetup together. Before the meetup started, we wanted to rendezvous at his house and then ride our motorcycles to the spot together. I rode my motorcycle from my house to his using my GPS. I've never been to his house before. He lived about 35 minutes away from me in a town I've passed by but never visited. As soon as I got to his house, Santiago was already turning on his motorcycle in front of his garage. "Hey man, how've you been?" I spoke. "Good, and you?" he replied. "Great. I love this weather. You ready to go?" "Hold on, let me put my dogs inside." Once we were all set to go, Santiago rode his motorcycle in front of me as I followed. He knew his way around to get us out of the neighborhood and back on the main road. Now here's where things get weird. Between the cluster of suburban neighborhood houses there was a long building that broke the pattern. I saw it in the distance as Santiago and I rode closer. The building was sitting on a hill and just looked unnatural in its place. As we got past each stop sign and rode closer, the building strangely kept looking more and more familiar. I kept my bike going at a decent speed of 20 miles per hour. I intended to look at this building closely and drove slowly. Then, Santiago and I passed by the front of the building. I constantly turned my head to look at it, then to the road so I didn't fall or crash. But once we were right in front of it, I just stared. I realized it when I saw the main doors. It was just like in my dreams. A long one-story building sitting on top of a grassy green hill. The same distinct main entrance doors. A red and yellow playground on the side of the building. A medium-sized parking lot. There was something so liminal about this building. Almost like those liminal spaces pictures that you see everywhere online. The building did not look real, but it was there right in front of me. Once I turned my head back to the road, we reached the next stop sign and I nearly bumped tires with Santiago's bike. Then, eventually, Santiago and I got farther and farther away. The rest of the day went well. We went to the meetup, saw a bunch of cool motorcycles, ate at a restaurant in the area, then parted ways and headed home. I had almost forgotten about the building until I rode home on my motorcycle and had time to think about it. I thought, what was that place? A school? Why did it look almost the exact same as that school that I see in my dreams? Have I been there before? No, that can't be. I've never visited such a specific neighborhood before. There's no way I've seen this building in my life. It's just not possible for this dream school to be real. Last night, I dreamed of the school again. It started off with me looking at the time. It was noon and I was just arriving to school. I was walking towards the entrance in a hurry. I entered the building, and the students were walking in the halls as usual. I checked my schedule to see where I had to go next. In the list of unintelligible writing, I somehow deduced that I had to go to pottery class. I walked in an aimless direction until I reached a small classroom. An old man with white hair and glasses looked at me angrily as I took my seat. I always hated old grumpy teachers. This guy was no different. Where have you been? What, you don't think this class is important? You haven't even started on the first project and we're already on project 4. As always, I just sit there, confused and ashamed. The entire class giggling or shaking their heads in disappointment. The teacher gave me the angriest face as his right hand shook while holding a small pot. Right before the dream ended, I saw the pot leave his hand and soar in my direction. I woke up not knowing if I was still dreaming or not. Dazed, I had to remind myself that it was only a dream. That dream was extremely vivid. More so than the others because the school felt all too real. It was like I was there. The similarities between the dream school and the real building I saw were uncanny. Something made me want to investigate it further. I had Google Maps pulled up on my phone. I was looking at Santiago's address while lying in bed. I knew the building should be around his house, maybe about 5 or 6 blocks away. Since the meetup spot was more east, I tapped and dragged the map to the right slowly. It took only seconds until I found the long building. In this top-down view, I saw how it broke the pattern from the rest of the houses. I tapped it to see if I could get more info on it. Strangely, Google Maps did not have this building listed as anything. It just showed the address as if it were another house. Then I went into street view mode to get a look at it from street level. Oh God. I thought to myself. It looked the exact same as the school I visited in my dreams. This can't be a coincidence. I must see it for myself. It had been 8 days since I first noticed the building while cycling. Unable to contain my curiosity, I decided to visit. The morning was brisk, the sky clouded over as I drove to the school I'd seen in my dreams. Reaching the parking lot of the school around 8 a.m., I was surprised to find other cars. The school was supposedly abandoned. I ventured towards the entrance, hoping to catch a glimpse of the interior through the glass doors. As I pressed my face against the glass, my eyes were met with an empty hallway, but my ears heard chatter, laughter, and footfalls of hundreds of invisible people. It was eerie and I felt compelled to explore. After a quick check to ensure no one was watching, I pushed the doors open and stepped in. A bustling crowd materialized out of nowhere. The previously dilapidated hall was now teeming with students. I was bewildered, making sure this was not a dream by pinching myself. Suddenly, the crowd dispersed into classrooms, leaving me alone. I proceeded to walk down the hallway, unable to see into classrooms through the small, square windows on the doors. Suddenly, a harsh voice behind me scolded me for skipping class. I turned around to see a towering elderly lady, curly gray hair framing her stern face. Despite my protests, she angrily dragged me into a classroom. In the classroom, my shock grew as I saw a room full of students with unsettling grins, staring straight ahead. The teacher, Miss Howler, distributed assignments on organic chemistry while I sat at the back, confused and nervous. When asked to retrieve a stack of past assignments, I tried to escape but was hindered by the locked door. Miss Howler caught me and threw me onto the floor where the papers were scattered. She demanded I pick them up. While doing so, I noticed a drop of blood from a paper cut on my face. I then requested to go to the bathroom, which was granted, but under the escort of a fellow student, James. Outside the classroom, I tried questioning James about the strange school. He simply said I had been there before. I disagreed. Once in the bathroom, I tricked James into leaving me alone under the guise of needing more time. I was determined to not go back to that terrifying classroom. Spiders. I've been a groundskeeper at the Silkweb Manor for about a year now. The ancient stone mansion has a charm that hides 1,000 secrets within its shadowy corners, but nothing was as chilling as the tale of the spinner. They do say they built the manor atop a network of arachnid lairs, a catacomb of nightmares, Mrs. Howard, the old housekeeper, told me one stormy night. Her frail fingers danced over the rim of her teacup, her eyes glinting in the firelight. Arachnids? You mean like spiders? I asked, swallowing the lump in my throat. Spiders and I have never gotten along well. She nodded. But not just any spiders. The spinner. A spider of mythical proportions, said to weave webs of silk stronger than steel and finer than gossamer. The next day, I was tasked to prune the ivy that had started to creep into the western wing of the manor. I began to notice silk-like threads hanging down, their luster catching the morning light, hard as steel when I tried to cut them. I thought about the spinner. Could it be real? Surely not. It had to be just another old wives' tale. That evening, as I was about to pack up, I heard a sound coming from the manor's basement. The low, rhythmic humming was almost melodic, like a lullaby that sang the sun to sleep. I decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, I descended the dark, stone steps. The humming grew louder, and it seemed as though the walls themselves were pulsating. I felt a chill run down my spine. As I turned the corner, my beam of light caught something enormous in the corner. Good Lord! I gasped, stumbling backward. A spider, easily the size of a large dog, was spinning a silvery thread from its abdomen, weaving an intricate web that spanned the entire room. Its 8 eyes reflected my flashlight, glowing with an eerie bioluminescence. Suddenly, the spinner stopped and turned towards me, its mandibles clattering. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and before I knew it, the creature lunged. The following morning, Mrs. Howard found me outside the manor's main doors. My clothes were torn and smeared with a strange, silver substance. I couldn't remember anything from the night before. I looked down at my hands, covered in deep, silvery web patterns, like scars. No one believed my tale, of course. They said it must have been the hallucinations of a tired mind. But every night, I still hear the rhythmic humming coming from the basement. And each morning, I find more of those silver webs in places where they weren't the night before. In Silkweb Manor, I don't sleep anymore. Not when the spinner might be watching, waiting to weave its chilling tales into my dreams. No sleep. Not while the whispers of the spider's lullaby echo in my ears, a constant reminder of the lurking, 8-legged nightmare in the bowels of the manor. The Curse of the YouTube Phantom. Late one sleepless night, I found myself wandering through the eerie silence of my apartment, the only light a ghostly glow emanating from my laptop screen. I was aimlessly scrolling through YouTube, the silence occasionally shattered by the distant hustle and bustle of Tokyo's nightlife. In the deluge of vlogs, movie trailers, and viral music videos, I stumbled upon a peculiar video. The title was hauntingly intriguing, The Curse of the YouTube Phantom. Curiosity, the companion of many a sleepless soul, was piqued. I clicked on the video, a creation by an obscure user known only as Kage no Oni. The description beneath the video was as cryptic as it was chilling. The YouTube Phantom preys on the solitude of midnight viewers. If you're watching this, you've already summoned it. Watch at your own peril, it read. A sense of foreboding filled me as I hovered my cursor over the play button. This wasn't my first ghost story, but something about this felt unsettlingly real. Disregarding my instincts, I pressed play. A pitch-black screen filled my laptop, a chilling contrast to the other open tabs of colorful chatter and lively GIFs. Then, an image flickered on the screen, a grainy monochrome depiction of a traditional Japanese room, tatami mats covering the floor, shoji screens adorning the walls, and a woman dressed in a pristine white kimono sat in the center, incisa. Her face was obscured by her long, black hair, with only an unsettling grin visible. The screen went black once more, and a haunting voice echoed from my speakers. "You've let me in," it whispered, and then the screen returned to the YouTube homepage. The glow of the screen now felt colder, the room somehow darker. I tried to convince myself it was a well-crafted prank, but the once comforting silence of my room was now heavy with an unseen presence. I could feel it, a spectral shadow lurking in my peripheral vision. In the days that followed, my life spiraled into chaos. My laptop screen would flicker unpredictably, the image of the woman sometimes intruding on my work, sometimes during binge-watching sessions. Her voice resonated in my dreams, "You've let me in." Weeks have passed. I'm sleep-deprived, paranoid, and emotionally drained. My laptop, once a source of entertainment and work, has become a cursed object, my life tainted by the YouTube phantom. If you stumble upon a video by Kage no Oni, for the love of God, don't click play. But then again, if you're reading this, maybe it's already too late.